The mystery of the black scribes who vanished with their books is not just a story about people who disappeared into the sands of time. It is a story about brilliance, guardianship, dedication, and the kind of responsibility that only a few people in history were strong enough to carry. When you hear the word scribe, you might imagine someone quietly writing. But in Africa's ancient kingdoms, a scribe was not simply a writer. He was the protector of memory, the defender of truth, the preserver of identity. And when these black scribes vanished, they did not just leave empty rooms behind, they left behind questions, clues, echoes, and an energy that still stirs in every person who feels a pull toward wisdom, creativity, or higher purpose. Their disappearance became one of the greatest mysteries of world history, and their legacy became one of the most powerful motivations for anyone searching for meaning, direction, or inner strength. When we talk about these scribes, we are talking about thinkers who shaped civilization. They existed in places where writing was considered sacred, not because it belonged to a religion, but because it belonged to the progress of humanity. In Kemet, Nubia, Timbuktu, Songhai, Benin, and countless other African centers of learning, writing was not a luxury, it was a craft that shaped destiny. These scribes wrote the laws, the scientific ideas, the medical observations, the astronomical measurements, the philosophical reflections, the poetry, the stories, and the strategies that moved societies forward. Their work influenced generations, yet their names rarely appear in modern textbooks. And the most intriguing part of their story is that many of them vanished, taking their manuscripts, scrolls, codices, and records with them. For centuries, people asked the same question: where did they go, and why did they leave? Some say these scribes hid their works because they knew invaders were approaching. Others believe they dispersed their writings across cities, so no enemy could destroy everything at once. Some historians think groups of scribes fled with their manuscripts into deserts or mountains to protect knowledge for a future generation. But whatever the reason, their disappearance left a gap in history, one that people still feel today. And yet this mystery does not weaken us. It does not leave us empty. Instead, it fuels something powerful. It awakens a desire to learn, a hunger to grow, and a deep sense that we come from people who valued knowledge so much that they were willing to sacrifice everything for it. Think about what kind of courage it takes to safeguard wisdom during times of danger. Think about the kind of confidence a person must have to write truths that could challenge kings, protect communities, or inspire change. These scribes were not warriors with swords. They were warriors with ink, tools, and ideas, and sometimes that kind of bravery is even greater. Because writing is permanent, writing outlives the writer. Writing shapes the future in ways a weapon never can. The scribes understood this. They knew that if they lost their scrolls, they would lose their history, their identity, their discoveries, and their voice in the world. So they held on to those manuscripts as if they were carrying the heartbeat of an entire people. And when they vanished, the mystery they left behind became a reminder that knowledge is powerful, so powerful that some would try to steal it, silence it, or hide it. There is something deeply motivating about this story because it tells us that our ancestors were thinkers, creators, innovators, and protectors. And it challenges us to ask ourselves, what kind of knowledge are we protecting today? What kind of identity are we preserving? What kind of legacy are we leaving behind? The scribes may have vanished, but they didn't disappear without leaving fingerprints on the world. Their influence exists in architecture, where precise measurements show advanced mathematics. It exists in ancient medical practices that modern science confirms. It exists in philosophies that shaped empires and guided leaders. It exists in maps, trade records, genealogies, agricultural techniques, astronomical charts, and even in the languages spoken across continents. Their work is hidden, yes, but not lost. It echoes inside us because we are descendants of civilizations that valued intelligence, wisdom, and growth. The mystery of these scribes also teaches us something personal. Not everyone will understand your purpose, your mission, or why you protect certain things in your life. Some people protect ideas, some protect dreams, some protect personal value, but everyone has something inside them worth guarding. The scribes remind us that our greatest treasure is not money, not status, not praise, but knowledge, the kind that builds confidence, expands possibilities and strengthens identity. And just like the scribes, each of us is responsible for carrying something meaningful through life. It might be creativity, talent, discipline, compassion, leadership, or resilience. It might be a message, a skill, or a vision the world needs. You don't have to carve your name in stone or write on papyrus to contribute to the world. Sometimes the most powerful contributions are the ones you practice in silence, the ones that grow quietly, the ones that will one day influence someone who never even knew your name. The scribes vanished, but they left a blueprint for how to live with purpose. They lived with awareness, intention, and discipline. They paid attention to details. They worked with care. They respected time. They believed in progress. They embraced learning. They knew that the mind was one of the greatest tools ever created, and they sharpened it daily. Their story becomes motivation for anyone who feels overlooked or underestimated. These scribes didn't chase attention. They chased excellence. They didn't seek applause, they sought accuracy. They didn't ask for recognition, they asked for truth. And in doing so, they became legends without needing to be seen. Imagine how powerful that mindset is in today's world. Most people want visibility. Most want instant rewards. Most want quick results. But the scribes teach us that greatness is built quietly, patiently, deliberately. It is built through education, reflection, and discipline. It is built when no one is watching, and sometimes the people creating the most important work are the ones the world never sees. That is why the mystery of the scribes is not discouraging. It is liberating. It tells you that even if the world never praises you, even if people don't understand what you're building, even if your efforts seem invisible, that doesn't mean your work is without value. Some of the most important contributions in history came from people who lived and worked in silence. And yet there is something even deeper. The story of the scribes tells us that hidden knowledge has a way of resurfacing when the world is ready for it. Even if a manuscript is lost, the ideas inside it often find new ways to reappear, through people, through movements, through creativity, through innovation. We carry the same intelligence and potential that these ancient scribes protect, and even though they vanished, their spirit remains in every person searching for truth, every person hungry for growth, every person who believes there is more to history than what the world has shown. Their courage becomes our courage. Their curiosity becomes our curiosity. Their devotion to knowledge becomes our responsibility. The disappearance of these black scribes is not just a historical event. It is a symbol. It symbolizes the world's attempt to silence African brilliance. It symbolizes the determination of thinkers who refuse to let knowledge fall into the wrong hands. And it symbolizes the resilience of ideas that survive even when their creators do not. When we speak of these scribes, we are not talking about ghosts. We are talking about God. Their lives may be shrouded in mystery, but their purpose is clear, to remind you that you come from a lineage of extraordinary minds. You come from people who valued wisdom more than comfort, truth more than safety, and legacy more than recognition. So when you hear the phrase, the mystery of the black scribes who vanished with their books, don't think of disappearance, think of preservation. Don't think of loss, think of protection. Don't think of silence, think of strength. Because their story is not about what the world lost. It is about what the world still carries inside people like you. The scribes may have vanished, but their brilliance didn't. It lives on in your curiosity, your ambition, your desire to rise, and your hunger to understand the world more deeply. And as long as you keep learning, keep seeking, keep expanding, and keep honoring the wisdom that came before you, the legacy of these scribes will never vanish again. Their disappearance was never just a mystery of history, it was a message. When knowledge becomes too powerful, it must be protected, not displayed. The scribes vanished, but the wisdom they carried still moves through generations. This idea becomes even more meaningful when we understand that these scribes were not simple writers or record keepers. They were guardians of truth in an age where truth could shift an entire civilization. Their vanishing act wasn't an accident, a myth, or a coincidence. It was a strategic decision made by brilliant minds who understood that the wrong hands can turn knowledge into a weapon, but the right hearts can turn it into a guide. These scribes saw storms coming long before others sensed danger, and they understood that the scrolls they held were far more than ink on papyrus. They were lifelines, memories, equations, histories, philosophies, observations, and maps of human progress. To lose them would mean losing a civilization's soul. So the scribes chose silence, distance, and disappearance, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. This message echoes across time because it applies not only to ancient Africa but to our own lives. Sometimes people protect what the world cannot handle. Sometimes the most valuable parts of us are the parts we guard the most fiercely. The scribes made a choice that many today still struggles, choosing legacy over recognition, truth over visibility, and preservation over popularity. Their decision teaches us that powerful ideas often require patience and protection, not exposure to environments that are not ready for them. They understood that the world of their time was shifting, dangerous, and unpredictable. Empires were rising and collapsing. Invaders searched for knowledge to exploit. Leaders manipulated narratives to gain control. In the middle of this chaos, the scribes chose to safeguard something greater than themselves. Their message survives because wisdom never dies. It travels. It flows across borders, through families, through culture, through memory, and through the essence of identity. Even when scrolls are burned or stolen, ideas refuse to disappear. Even when manuscripts are hidden or destroyed, the truths inside them find ways to revive. The scribes carried their knowledge into the unknown, and though they physically vanished, the lessons they protected resurfaced in later generations. You can see traces of their work in African architecture, in mathematical systems, in agricultural techniques, in oral traditions, in proverbs that survived colonization, and in the languages that still carry ancient nurtures of thought. Their wisdom moves invisibly because genuine brilliance never depends on visibility to survive. This keynote reminds us that sometimes silence is a strategy, sometimes stepping away is an act of power, sometimes walking into the unknown is the only way to protect what matters. These scribes were not running from the world. They were guarding the world from losing something essential. They valued wisdom so deeply that they were willing to remove themselves entirely to preserve it. Imagine the level of courage it takes to carry knowledge that could transform societies, then choose to disappear so that this knowledge avoids corruption. It is a sacrifice few would understand today, in a society where visibility is often mistaken for value. But the scribes proved that value comes from purpose, not exposure. Their disappearance also teaches us about timing. Not every truth is meant to be revealed in the moment it is created. Some truths must wait for the right era, the right minds, and the right hearts to receive them. The scribes recognized that the world around them was not ready to honor, protect, or correctly interpret the depth of what they had written. So they entrusted the future with their wisdom, knowing that one day someone would look back, search through ruins, translate fragments, and rediscover what they had worked so hard to preserve. When we read inscriptions today, study artifacts, explore ruins, or examine ancient African manuscripts, we are not discovering them, we are receiving a gift left intentionally by people who walked away to keep them whole. And there is something empowering in the idea that these scribes continue to live through us. Their brilliance is reflected in the creativity of young innovators who build without fear. It is reflected in the determination of students who study despite challenge. It is reflected in the persistence of dreamers who protect their ideas from people who would misuse them. It is reflected in the leaders who make decisions with wisdom instead of impulse. The scribes may have vanished long ago, but the same intelligence, precision, discipline, and clarity they held still appears in modern minds. You carry pieces of them, even if you don't realize. When you trust your intuition, when you protect your ideas, when you choose growth over chaos, you embody the same strength they carried. Their mystery inspires because it asks a powerful question. What knowledge are you protecting today? What truth inside you deserves time, patience, and protection? What idea must be guarded until the world is ready? The scribes teach us that not everything must be exposed immediately. Some dreams need silence. Some goals require privacy. Some transformations demand space. The world rarely honors hidden work, but hidden work is precisely what changes the world. By studying the scribes' disappearance, we are reminded that greatness built quietly can last centuries longer than greatness built for attention. Their message becomes a personal call to action. Protect your mind, protect your vision, Protect your future. Not every critic deserves access to what you are building. Not every environment deserves your deepest ideas. Not every moment is the right moment to reveal who you are becoming. The scribes walked away because they understood that knowledge has seasons. If revealed too early, it can be destroyed. If shared too widely, it can be diluted. But if protected, preserved, and nurtured, it can change everything. And so their disappearance becomes a blueprint, not a mystery. It shows us that wisdom is not meant to be hoarded, but it must be honored. It must be cared for. It must be carried with intention. Their silence echoes across generations because it teaches us to rise with intelligence, not just ambition. It teaches us that the power inside us is worth guarding. And it teaches us that knowledge, when protected, can outlive empires, conquer time, and shape the world long after its protectors are gone. The scribes proved that greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it moves silently, guarding ideas that could shape the world. Their story is a reminder that the people who change history are not always the ones standing on stages, raising their voices, or demanding attention. Many of the greatest contributions humanity has ever known were crafted in quiet rooms, in dimly lit corners, by minds so focused on their purpose that the world around them didn't even realize what was being built. These old African scribes understood something that modern society often forgets: the value of silence, the power of discipline, and the strength of a vision that doesn't need applause to keep moving. They worked with the kind of humility that comes from knowing your mission is bigger than your ego. They carved symbols, preserved languages, documented discoveries, and protected knowledge that would one day help the world understand itself better. And they did it not for fame, not for credit, not for statues, but because they believed in the duty of preserving truth. Their legacy teaches us that the most important work is often done long before the spotlight arrives. Think about it. Every invention, every breakthrough, every moment that shaped history started quietly. It began with someone thinking, observing, planning, training, writing, or experimenting behind closed doors. The scribes embodied this principle perfectly. They held information that empires depended on. They kept records that leaders trusted. They safeguarded wisdom that generations would later build upon. Yet most of them never had their names written in grand stories, never had crowds cheering for them, and never received recognition while they lived. But their impact was so powerful that the world still feels it today. Their silence was not weakness, it was strategy. Silence allowed them to think deeply without distraction. It gave them focus in a world that wanted noise. It allowed them to protect fragile ideas before the world was mature enough to understand them. And in that silence, they nurtured concepts that would survive wars, migration, cultural shifts, and the slow drift of time. Many of these scribes carried secrets in their minds the way warriors carried shields. They guarded knowledge as if protecting a treasure chest, not because it belonged to them, but because the future needed it. That level of responsibility requires discipline, integrity, and a heart that cares more about purpose than popularity. Their story challenges us today. We live in a world where people are pressured to post every achievement, to perform every improvement, to compete constantly for attention. But the scribes show us a different path, the path of those who build greatness quietly. They remind you that you don't have to announce your dreams to make them real. You don't have to broadcast every step of your journey. You don't have to convince anyone of your value. True greatness grows from consistency, not noise. It grows from the hours nobody sees, the nights you spend learning, the early mornings you dedicate to your craft, the moments of self-reflection that help you evolve. These are the invisible investments that shape visible success. Their silence teaches patience. The scribes didn't rush their work because they understood that rushing risks mistakes, and mistakes can destroy timeless knowledge. In your life, the same principle applies. Building something meaningful requires patience with yourself and with the process. The world may not see your progress yet, but progress is still happening. Just like the scribes writing on papyrus, every small stroke is part of the bigger picture. Every tiny improvement, every quiet decision, every private victory matters. Even when it feels slow, you are building something important. Their legacy also teaches the strength of protecting your mind. The scribes didn't let anyone access their work without earning that trust. They understood that knowledge is powerful and must be handled with care. Today, this translates into guarding your ideas from negativity, protecting your goals from people who don't understand them, and keeping your energy safe from those who drain it. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone deserves to know your dream. Some things must be protected until they are strong enough to stand on their own. What makes the story of these silent scribes so powerful is not just what they recorded, but how they lived. They were disciplined even when nobody was watching. They were consistent even without reward. They believed in their purpose so deeply that external validation didn't matter. That kind of commitment is rare, but it is also the foundation of every person who eventually rises above the norm. When the world finally recognizes someone's greatness, it is often celebrating work that was done in years of silence. Their lives remind you that quiet effort is not wasted effort. The days when no one praises you are not empty days. The seasons when nothing seems to be paying off are not failures. They are preparation. The scribes were preparing the world for knowledge it didn't yet understand. You too may be preparing for a future that hasn't revealed itself yet. The universe often hides breakthroughs behind periods of quiet growth, testing your patience, your dedication, and your belief in your own path. So when you feel unseen, remember the scribes. When you feel unheard, remember that silence can be a strategy. When you feel like your progress is invisible, remember that invisible work often becomes the most powerful. When you feel like giving up because the world isn't watching, remember that the scribes kept going, not for recognition but for purpose. And because they did, the world gained knowledge that shaped civilizations. Their legacy lives today, not in noise, not in fame, but in the quiet strength of every person who chooses discipline over distraction, patience over pressure, purpose over popularity. Let their story remind you that you don't have to shout to change the world. Sometimes the ones who say the least are the ones who leave the greatest mark. Though the scribes walked into the unknown with their books, they left behind a blueprint. Protect your mind, value your identity, honor your brilliance, and remember that the world often tries to erase what it fears. Their disappearance became more than a mystery. It became a lesson about how fragile knowledge can be when threatened by those who do not understand it or feel intimidated by its power. These scribes lived in a time where ideas were dangerous, where writing could challenge entire empires, and where preserving truth required courage most people never see. They carried their scrolls with a seriousness that came from knowing those pages represented the soul of a people. Stories, inventions, languages, philosophies, and memories that would help future generations understand who they were and how far they had come. When they walked away into the unknown, they were not just leaving with words written on papyrus. They were carrying the legacy of centuries, guarding it with a loyalty that only those who truly love knowledge can understand. And even though they vanished, even though their books were never recovered, the principles they lived by survived through the people who inherited their spirit. Their blueprint begins with protecting your mind. They understood that your thoughts, your creativity, your ideas, and your ability to think independently are the most valuable things you possess. A mind left unguarded becomes vulnerable to influence, manipulation, or the negativity of others. The scribes protected their minds through discipline, focus, and a deep respect for learning. They knew that every idea they formed could shape the future, so they nurtured their thoughts carefully. Today, that lesson is even more important. The world is loud, full of distractions, opinions, and battles for your attention. Protecting your mind means choosing what you absorb, choosing what you believe, and choosing what you allow to shape you. It means feeding your intellect with knowledge instead of noise. The scribes remind you that the greatest treasures in life are not material. They are the things no one can take unless you hand them over. Valuing your identity is the next part of their blueprint. These scribes knew who they were. They came from cultures rich in innovation, mathematics, astronomy, healing practices, architecture, and writing systems that shaped entire regions of the world. They carried that identity with pride, no matter how much external forces tried to diminish. Their existence proved that African intelligence, creativity, and scientific advancement were not accidents but long-standing traditions. Even when others tried to erase their contributions or rewrite their history, the scribes held firm to their identity. They didn't need validation from the outside because they knew their worth from within. Today, valuing your identity means understanding where you come from and refusing to let anyone define your story. It means knowing that your culture, your background, your experiences, and your voice matter, even in a world that may try to ignore or distort them. The scribes teach that identity is not something to hide or apologize for. It is something to strengthen and celebrate. Honoring your brilliance is another piece of what they left behind. These scribes were multi-talented thinkers, creators, and observers. They studied everything around them: nature, human behavior, languages, mathematics, medicine, and the rhythms of life. They honored their intelligence by using it, sharpening it, and refusing to settle for mediocrity. Brilliance is not arrogance. It is simply the act of recognizing your potential and refusing to dim it for anyone. The scribes would never have allowed their gifts to be wasted, and neither should you. Honoring your brilliance means taking your skills seriously, investing in your growth, and believing that your mind is capable of extraordinary things when you commit to nurturing. It means knowing that talent grows when fed and fades when neglected. Every moment you dedicate to improving yourself is a step toward fulfilling the greatness already planted within you. Finally, the scribes taught an unforgettable truth. The world often tries to erase what it fears. Their knowledge threatened systems built on control, so their work was targeted. Their intellect disrupted false narratives, so they were silenced. Their ability to record the truth made them dangerous to those who built power through deception. And this reality still exists today. Not just in history books, but in everyday life. Sometimes people will overlook you, doubt you, or attempt to diminish your value because they fear what you might become. They fear your confidence, your clarity, your growth, your independence, or your ability to think for yourself. The scribe's story teaches that this fear has nothing to do with your weaknesses and everything to do with your strength. When someone tries to erase you, it is often because they recognize something powerful within you that you have not yet fully seen. Even though the scribes vanished, their message remains alive in every person who fights to protect their mind, preserve their identity, honor their brilliance, and stand strong even when the world tries to reduce them. Their blueprint wasn't written in ink, it was written in action. It was etched into culture, memory, and the spirit of those who understand that knowledge is a form of freedom. Their disappearance becomes less of a tragedy and more of a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes are not the ones recorded in history books, but the ones who inspire through mystery, silence, and the traces they leave behind. The scribes live on through every individual who chooses growth over comfort, truth over imitation, and courage over conformity. They remind you that your power is not defined by the world around you but by the world within you, and when you protect that world, value it, honor it, and defend it boldly, nothing and no one can erase who you are meant to become.